Hey guys, Luna here, and welcome back to our life. Now, we're actually going to be doing the Boardwalk. I have to re-record this because it didn't actually properly record the first time. It was early morning, but the days were buzzing with excitement. Your whole family was gathered together with all 5 Césaires in their cozy living room. Today, you were all making a trip out to the Boardwalk set park. It was a regular enough outing for Derek's family, but it would be our first time going. The Boardwalk was a few hours away, and it was even further once setting out from Sunset Bird. That's why the adults decided to meet up here at the Césaire's apartment instead of gathering at the Boardwalk itself. It gave your moms a little break from driving, and everyone got their last change to run for the bathroom. You'd be leaving very soon. While you waited for the trip to officially start, you sat on the couch with your hands in your lap. For a few minutes now, you tried to keep track of what the group gathered around the kitchen were up to. Elizabeth, your moms, and Mrs. Césaire were all busily making preparations from what you could tell. Meanwhile, Mr. Césaire had his hands full rounding up his 2 youngest kids. It seems like they were taking an anti-shoe stance that morning, and in Nicholas's case, he needed to be talked into wearing a shirt too. On the cushion next to you, Derek was pumped for what the Boardwalk had to offer. He was rambling a mile a minute about all this fun stuff he couldn't wait to show you. You were never so how busy it might be. Tugging at the loose thread on your shirt, you tried focusing on the positives. No matter how many people would be there, you knew that you both had families to stick with. This journey was also the first time you and Derek's families were doing a big activity together. You couldn't finally believe it was when the adults went through with organizing the trip.
Let's go.
Kids, come join us in the kitchen. It's time for you to pack your treat bags.
Cool.
Sliding off the couch, you didn't have the faintest idea what Mrs. Césaire meant, but you were summoned, so you followed Derek's lead. He turned to say something over his shoulder. He guessed that line might have been confusing to a newcomer. The snack bags are what we do for larger trips. Me and my brothers, and you and Elizabeth too, we get to fill a little plastic baggie with any sweets and stuff we want. It's supposed to be for eating during the long hour drives, but no one really cares when we snack. It's just so we have something if we need it. Lucky, that's the coolest idea.
Same.
I think so too. It's great to have on hand. As you reached the kitchen, Elizabeth breezed past you and your mom's following a more relaxed pace. Derek raised a skeptical brow and pointed in her direction with a thumb. Doesn't she want a bag? Elizabeth stopped and spun around on her heel. Surprised, Derek pulled his pen back to his side. Elizabeth's lips curled into an all-too-pleased smirk.
So what?
You heard Mrs. Césaire. She called for the kids to come. Mom shook her head at Elizabeth's taunting display. Your sister stepped forward and held up a zipped bag that you hadn't noticed before. I already got mine when we're getting things set up for the rest of you. Her baggie was full of dried fruit and chocolate chips. She was teasingly dangling it in your face and then Derek's. Haha, very mature, Elizabeth. You're not one of the kids at all. He snickered at her. Elizabeth withdrew her treat bag. She watched you suspiciously while you composed yourself. It's nice to see you excited about snack time again. She snorted and gave you the most indignant stare. Ma leaned into Mom, trying to stifle the giggles. Everyone's gotta eat. After she left the kitchen and plopped down in your old spot on the couch. Your mom joined her, putting Elizabeth in the middle. Ma comfortingly patted Elizabeth's leg. Glancing back toward the kitchen, George and Nicholas were finally dressed and they dashed ahead of you. They excitedly crowded around their mom's legs. Now don't forget the bag actually has to be closed for it to count. She began passing around baggies to the 2 youngest, and then Miss Césaire turned to you and winked. And that's my one more rule for the treat bags. But other than that, feel free to go crazy. Nicholas and George took that as their cue to rush up to the counter lined with tasty options and started stuffing their bags. Mrs. Césaire handed you and Derek your own plastic baggies. Now that it was in your hand, you realized it was the smallest zip bag size. There's no way you're going to get a little bit of everything. From my experience, you can fit about 4 handfuls of stuff before it starts getting too tough to close. Answered before I could even ask. Thanks, mind reader. They The youngest boys swiftly finished selecting their road trip treats. George's bags closed easily, while Nicholas's was proving a challenge to squeeze shut. The plastic was ballooned out on all sides, entirely full of cookies and candy. His brow pinched as he struggled with the zip. To everyone's surprise, Nicholas got it to seal, and he proudly held the bag up for his mom under inspection. Impressed, she nodded. "Don't forget to take a water bottle too. We don't want to lose anyone to dehydration today." The two boys held their prize tightly and grabbed the water bottles off the edge of the counter on their way out of the kitchen. It was your turn now at the buffet, and the spread was delicious. What do I grab first? I like fruit gum candies. I like mangoes. Depending on the cereal, I like it. I do like chocolate chips. I'll go with the dried mango first, and then the fruit gummies, and then chocolate chips, and I'll go with sandwich cookies. Enjoy! Humming happily, you ran your hand across the side of the plastic baggie. You were grateful for your haul, and you proudly showed it to Derek. He gave you a thumbs up.
I gotcha.
Variety is the spice of life. He closed his bag, and you realized that it was completely full of a bunch of different things, too. Chuckling, you gently poked the straining side of his plastic baggie. Yes, it is. Derek leaned across the counter for the water bottle. He slid one over for you to take and grab one for himself, too. Okay, I'll close up the packs then. We can leave this out here for now.
Is that fine?
We don't have any more time to lose. Are we all ready? Several voices called back, answering yes. Mrs. Eyre raised an eyebrow and walked out of the kitchen. No one needs to go potty? No.
No.
I don't have to go potty.
Good.
Anyone have any questions before you go? She put her hands on her hips, glancing around the apartment. Mrs. Eyre raised his hand just as he caught her eye. I'd like to know how we arrange rides. There's room for 5 in the back of our car, and room for 3 in the mayor's car.
What do you think?
There's room to switch who's bringing who for those that want it. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Elizabeth and Luna are welcome to ride with us, or Derek can feel free to go with Pamela and Nolina. Nicholas and George are staying in our van, though. Frustrated, both the smaller boys pounded at their exclusion. George's jaw clenched as he crossed his arms. I'm not a baby. Why do I gotta stay in the van? I'm not baby. Nicholas, you still need a booster seat. We can't put that in their car. Mr. Cesare chuckled at Nicholas's angry grumbling as he passed by into the kitchen, aiming to pick at the remaining snacks. Mrs. Eyre sighed in a tickle, but a still long-suffering way. Dad and I need you to stay awake need you there to stay awake for such a long drive. Can you two please keep us company on the car ride? Releasing a deep breath, George nodded. He knew that this wasn't the day his mom was going to relent. Nicholas, on the other hand, continued to pout. Okay, Mom. Well, what do you think, lady?
That's fine.
Either way is fine with me. It's up to the kids to decide which they prefer. I'll stick with Mom's. She then curiously shifted her attention to you. The corners of her mouth pulled into a smirk because she knew that you and your friend were the ones that decided that the whole decision was for. Derek leaned in close to you, cupping a hand to the side of his mouth so only you could hear him. Luna, what are you thinking? Well, what are you thinking? He inched back and nervously scratched the side of his neck. His cheeks turned a darker shade of pink.
Well,
I'll be cool if you ride with me and my family. Then let's go with your idea. Really? Cool.
let's go.
Okay, now that that's settled, we'll see you later.
Take care.
See you soon, sweetie.
Oh!
Hold on, one last thing. Mrs. Eyre went over to your mom's and quickly went into some last-minute advice on the directions. While you waited, you noticed out the corner of your eye that Mrs. Eyre had moved from nibbling on the snacks. Instead, you caught him passing George and Nicholas an extra cookie each. Genuine cheer came back to both of their expressions. Their thread about the secret cookies that their earlier bitterness about being babied was all sweetened out. And that was that. Snacks and drinks were set, no one needed to go potty, and the rides were arranged. Directions were obtained, and it was finally time to get the trip started. The two families left the condo behind, chattering with eagerness for the day's activities. At the parking lot, the group split up into their different cars. You followed Derek into his parents' minivan. Buckling up, you settled in for the long haul. Here we go. The Cesare minivan was a full house. Mrs. Cesare hop behind the wheel with his wife shooting shotgun. She bent back to double-check that Nicholas was fully strapped into the car seat behind her. Derek, of course, had to sit in the open seat in that second row. That left you and George to take control of the way back. Mrs. Ayres bars furred with frustration. Once again, it became a battle. The wriggling 6-year-old fought against her attempt to tie in the car seat's front straps. Once she succeeded, Mrs. Ayres brushed the hair that fell forward behind her ear and turned to the rest of you with a lighter expression. Are we all ready? Yes. Yeah, Mom. Boardwalk fun, here we come.
Very good.
She made sure Nicholas was secure one last time before getting herself situated properly. You heard the click of her seatbelt, and then Miss Cesare shifted her attention this time to the last row of seats. It's nice to have you here, Luna. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to get more time with Derek. He's been telling me all about the boardwalk. Glad to hear that. Hopefully it lives up to expectations today. Now that everyone was settled in, the car roared to life and Mr. Cesare pulled onto the road. Out of habit, he reached over and clicked the CD player on. Upbeat children's music loudly filled the car. Squealing with excitement, Nicholas started kicking his feet to the beat of the song. Next to you, George leaned an elbow on the car door and rested his chin on the palm of his hand. There was a faint smile and tugging at the corner of his mouth as he settled in to stare out the window. You caught Derek's green-eyed gaze peeking out at you from the space in between the headrest and the backrest of the seats. You waved at him. Derek moved out of sight, but only to twist around in the seat to talk to you directly.
It's all good.
Thanks for coming with us on the drive. I can't wait for you to see the boardwalk. It's going to be so fun. You only got as far as opening your mouth when Nicholas interrupted into a loud scream of loud cheers. The young boy threw both of his arms in the air, and Derek ducked into his seat, clearly embarrassed.
Woo!
Nicholas's outburst didn't surprise you one bit. A tiny chuckle escaped Derek as he slowly slid his gaze back over to you. Sorry about that, Luna. The whole drive is probably going to be this rowdy. I can handle it. Hopefully. Oh, what's that out the window? Look! You joked. What? He scanned everything that he could see from the car seat. Where there was nothing eye-catching to find, Nicholas grumpily moved his attention back towards you. I don't get it. What do you see, Luna? It was... You lift a few inches and you see him peer out the window past his mop of hair. Then you let yourself fall back down. Oh, darn. You must have missed it. What was it? A cow. No way. Yeah, huh? And there... Oh, no. No, there's another one. Leaning forward, you pointed at his window. Nicholas spun and squished the palms of his hands and nose into the glass. Where? It's right there. It's a rank cab I had, too. Can you believe it? I can't find it. Darn, you missed it again. It blinked away like it had a teleporter, but you know what that means. Nicholas's eyes widened, and he quickly started shaking his head, holding a single finger to... Yes, quickly shaking his head. Holding a single finger to your lips for him to remain quiet, you scooted forward as far as you can in his direction. I think that means that must have been a secret undercover agent. Nicholas gasped at your revelation, and then sat back down in the car seat. He crossed his arms and peeked out the window again. Don't worry, we'll just have to keep our eyes out to spot more secrets hiding in plain sight, right? Yeah! Later in the drive, Nicholas let out a gleeful squeal. You were confused at first at what he managed to get that reaction out of him, but soon it became clear. Nicholas remembered he had an entire bag of snacks. He triumphantly pulled out of his pocket and started munching away at all the tasty treats inside. For once, Georgie followed Nicholas's lead and relaxed into a chill snack time. Georgie munched away while watching the world pass by out of his window. Derek, on the other hand, simply rested back in his seat with his arms behind his head. You saved all your snacks for later. Resting your head back, you had a hunch that these snacks would be a lifesaver once your stomach started growling later. After Nicholas had devoured every crumb and licked every bit of sugar from his fingers, he was ready to play again. And so the ride continued on the blasting beats of classic kindergarten tunes and with fun road games. And despite the trip supposedly taking hours, it didn't feel long until you noticed the first signs of your destination. You caught the first flashes of the tall rides in the distance. Your worries about what were to come to pass began to creep back in. Both families pulled into the parking lot, and kids excitedly bounced out of the cars. The parents cheerfully waved at each other as the groups closed their distance between them. With everyone regrouped, the family strolled onto the boardwalk. Your eyes widened massively. It was like you stepped into the bright world of color. There were shops displaying various beach towels and boogie boards decorated with either popular cartoon characters or tropical flowers. Clothing stalls that had racks of sundresses, cover-ups, and swimwear in every pattern imaginable. Ahead, you could make out colorful tufts and stuffed animals from the prize boards. Darts, ring-toss, skee balls, and more waited further down the boardwalk. Music filled the air, but when you listen closely, you can make out so much more. There was various cheers and shouts of victory and fear, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, coming from a massive wooden roller coaster that towered around the stalls. From what you could tell already, the boardwalk was easily 5 times the scale as the entire shopping street in Sunset Bird. You're a bit uncomfortable because it's a lot of things going on. Your insides gradually twisted themselves into knots as you followed your group deep into the crowd. Taking a breath, you tried to stay grounded, focusing on your friends and family. The group began navigating down the wooden boards. Mrs. Eyre hastily grabbed onto Nicholas's arms for safekeeping, and just in time too. The bustling mood of each area had Nicholas raring to go. He wanted to seek, play, and explore every inch. Unfortunately, the 4 parents were not as energetic as the hyper 6-year-old. With an affectionate shake of her head, Mrs. Eyre struggled to hold onto Nicholas's tiny hand as he attempted to sprint ahead. Irene, why not let the children go?
What?
Huh?
Will that be fine?
This child here and the rest of them, I'm sure they'd rather enjoy the park on their own at their own pace. They'd be safe with each other. She carefully weighed the scenarios in her mind while Nicholas was too busy to forcibly move her forward to notice the important conversation happening. Your mom shared a glance. I'll be alright with that as long as no one left the boardwalk. It's large, but not too large.
Alright.
The kids are getting older, and they've earned a little freedom from all our seeing eyes. Okay, adults and kids get to have their own day at the boardwalk. You caught both Elizabeth and Derek perking up. It hadn't had the same impact on you. You only worried more. And then Mrs. Eyre passed Nicholas off to her husband for a moment. She motioned for the older kids to come closer to her.
No more.
No more treats for Nicholas. He has enough candy and cookies for the day. I'm counting on you to keep to that. Mrs. Eyre over there can't be trusted.
Oops.
He stood up straight and looking away from his wife, pretending that he had no idea what she was talking about. Her knowing smile cracked into a light-hearted laugh. You admired the way her eyes sparkled, teasing her husband. She moved her attention back to the rest of you, and both George and Elizabeth gave her confident nods.
I'm on it.
We got this, Mom. Derek answered with an added thumbs up. Mrs. Eyre proudly beamed, letting her gaze go between her boys. No need to worry, you can count on us. Oh, speaking of things, I have some money on hand from me and my brothers. Will you and Elizabeth be able to buy ride tickets and knickknacks or any sort of that stuff? I doubt the pocket change I have is going to be enough for anything. I remembered my wallet. You confidently put your hands on your hips. Unimpressed, Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Good for you.
Don't worry about it.
We were going to spend money on you two today anyway, so there's no harm if we let you have it. Besides, we don't get to go on trips like this every day. Go a little wild. Exactly, we want you to be able to do things here. Mom dug into her purse and then pulled out a handful of bills. She carefully counted out $15 and handed it to Elizabeth. Your sister, unimpressed at that amount, and counted the bills herself. Mom handed you your own $15 next, and you quietly chuckled to yourself. You couldn't help but think how it probably would have been a 20 if Mr. Holton was there. Thanks, I'll use this wisely.
Thanks.
Thanks, Moms.
All right.
We're all set then. We'll meet here again at 8 p.m. in front of the first stall. Mrs. Eyre took her youngest and crouched down to his level. She brushed some of the stray hairs out of his face. Go and stay with the brothers today. Be good for them. I hope everything's good, but I can still imagine there's going to be some chaos shenanigans happening. With an eager nod, Nicholas belted over to Derek and clung onto his jeans. Derek laughed at the sudden weight and pulled his hands firmly on the younger boy's shoulders, just in case he decided to run off. The sets of two parents disappeared into the crowd, moving toward the nearby stores. Standing on your tiptoes, you caught your moms waving goodbye one last time before they were completely out of sight. Elizabeth spun in a circle, spotting all the cool things she might want to try. She must have deemed the boardwalk to be cool because she was cheerier by the second. Eventually, her gaze returned to you and the Cesare brothers, and it was clear that her daydreams crashed back to reality. Next to her, George rocked up to his tiptoes and then back down. Catching your eye, he stopped nervously and inched a little bit closer to Derek. It must feel awkward for a kid who must have two new additions to what was usually a special family affair. You offered him a small smile, but tried not to stare at him. Scuffing your own foot forward on the wooden board, you tried to hold back your own displeasure about the situation. Derek awkwardly took a couple large steps forward. His strides were wobbly as Nicholas held onto him tighter, but Derek was ultimately unfazed. Okay, we should start the day right. The face paint install is up near here, up in the front. Face painting! I know some people absolutely love face painting, and it can be fun. George brightened at that notion, and George brightened with that notion. Nicholas shook his Derek as hard as he could without shaking Seth off. Derek's grin widened as he laughed with his brother's delights. Yeah, let's go.
So immature.
Face painting? Are you serious? Nicholas was too absorbed with his thoughts of paint to notice her attitude, but George's joy vanished instantly. You could pinpoint the exact sentence Elizabeth remembered how much younger Derek's siblings were. Elizabeth uncrossed her arms, feeling a bit wrong. She cleared her throat and begrudgingly tried to pull back on her visible distaste. I don't need one. However, of course we can go over to that stall. Anyone who wants it to do it should. That's great. Honestly, there's a lot of time to do lots of things, so it's a big deal if sometimes it isn't what you want to do, right? His green stare hardened. He directed the statement at both the youngest and the oldest member in the crew. Elizabeth snorted, displeased that a kid like Derek was acting like he was in charge. But Derek wasn't in his respectful guest mode, which is what Elizabeth usually saw of him in the neighborhood. Derek was entirely in the oldest brother role. He kept a stern stare on her for another moment before shifting over to you. Are you alright with letting my brothers get their face painted? You can too if you wanna. It's actually a lot of fun. I don't mind going, but I don't want to get painted either. That's fine, Luna. You'll be there for more support, right?
Alright!
Right. Before anyone moved, Derek carefully removed Nicholas's hand from his pants and took a hold of the youngest boy's hand and said, like his mom had done before. Derek cheerfully pointed ahead with his free hand.
Let's go!
Yeah, let's go! Derek led your way for your group. You followed his line of sights to the row and shops and spotted a large, colorful umbrella. As he approached, you noticed two open chairs under the shade of that umbrella, one for the artist and the other for the person being painted. Next to it was a canvas posted with a collage of photos. The example showed off cheeks dotted with daisies, sparkling glowing stars shooting over temples, peace signs, and a whole rainbow of butterflies. His skulls and spiders were options for kids who wanted to get their face painted and still look tough. Someone like Cove, you thought to yourself, chuckling. Of course, that was only a joke. You're positive Cove would actually get like a fish, or shell, or a dolphin, or something similar to that. You peeked at the tools in the mirror on the wheeled counter. The artist appeared to be a teen just out of high school, or maybe in college. Many of the stalls you passed had younger people running them. The artist eyed your group carefully in return. Hello. Hi, welcome. I'm Xavier. Would you like me to paint your face today?
Definitely.
Yes, please. Xavier went over and plopped down on one of the chairs. Derek nudged George toward the other. Do you want to go first? George hesitated and chewed at his bottom lip, but he wasn't sure until he realized that no one else moved to take the open seat. He seized the opportunity and sat down. What can I do for you?
Okay.
Excuse me. I want a football. Right here. Without missing a beat, George pointed to his forehead. Elizabeth huffed quietly at the conversation, but Xavier gave a serious nod. I can do that? No problem. The artist lightly brushed George's bangs aside and began to work. Next to you, Derek growled furrowly intently as he studied the picture of collage of options. I don't think you could possibly think any harder without breaking your brain. What's the problem? But Derek continued to quietly mull things over. He pressed a hand to his chin and sighed. Nicholas will get what I get. I am not sure what to get because of that. He doesn't like soccer as much as George likes football, so that's probably not the best choice. I could get a car for obvious reasons, but Nicholas also really loves rainbows, and he does already have cars on his shirt. You could get a spider. Nicholas can pretend it's real one and scare people. That'll give him something to entertain himself. Oh yeah, it's a great idea. Derek ran an absent-minded hand through his hair and imagined all the ways his brother would terrorize those within an orbit, and he laughed.
Right.
I think Nico's gonna get a kick out of it. The corners of your lips curled mischievously. You rubbed your hands together. Excellent. George's football didn't take long to finish at all. He got up with a delighted grin and tried to tip his head enough to see the painting without the mirror. He couldn't, but that didn't put a damper on his fun. One of his hands hovered around the football, and he knew that he was fighting the urge to poke at the wet paint. Derek slid onto the customer's chair next. Nicholas leaned his hand on the edge of the seat and intently watched the artist get to work. As the painting took shape, the smile on Nicholas's face grew until he was cackling. He finally figured it out. The artist proudly added the finishing touches and then addressed the youngest Suzerain and said. Xavier's twirled the paintbrush. And what do you think? It's awesome. That's just what I like to hear. You're good to go then.
Thanks.
Thank you. Derek gave one last glance at himself in the mirror and hopped off the chair. He pointed at the open seat with his thumb. Your turn, Nico. Nicholas clambered onto the chair with a pinched brow. Once he got settled, he sat there like up tall like a big boy. Oh, what can I get for you today? Spider! Xavier's gaze instinctively went back to the piece they just finished on Derek's. They immediately put together what was happening. That's a great idea. Let's get started. Nicholas nodded and put all the mentally energy into holding still. He weren't sure how long the 6-year-old could keep that up before starting to squirm. Glancing over at George one more time, Derek kept most of his attention on his littlest brother. Without moving his gaze, he tilted his head in your direction. Glancing over at George one more time, Derek kept most of his attention on his little brother. Without moving his gaze, he tilted his head in your direction. So, Luna, be honest with me, how do I look? You look great. Derek slowly shook his head and then tried to hide his snickering with his hand. You crossed your arms and let your gaze trail over his drying paint on his cheek. I'm serious. Thanks, that's a relief. After both of you sat down to watch Nicholas get paint to match, stroke by stroke, Xavier started with the outline and then filled in with the center drawing. It wasn't long before it was complete. You're set. Nicholas jumped out of his chair with a brand new spider adoring his cheek. Aw, it's adorable. They're on opposite cheeks. He rushed over to rejoin his brothers, excitedly pointing out the painting. Welcome back, Nico. Look what I got. Nice.
Awesome.
It's great. Now that the Cesare brothers were happy and painted, it was time to discover the next activity. Derek paid for him and his brothers. Have a good day. You too, Xavier. You gave one final round of thank yous to Xavier before moving down from the stall. The flow of the crowd brought you to an all drifting down the boardwalk. As you traveled further in, you actually spotted your parents. The Cesare boys jumped and waved, and their dad did exactly the same thing across the way. Next, Mrs. Cesare tried holding her ear-to-ear grin with her hands. Your moms had their heads close together, laughing from Mrs. Cesare's reaction. You waved quietly. All the commotion had you blushing, and in comparison to the Zayfair's family, you were shyly waving. You hoped that your moms could find you amongst the crowd. Knowing that you and Elizabeth had to be close by, your mom scanned over the unfamiliar people until they found you. They both waved back cheerfully. Then your parents continued on their walk with their own adventures. Your group traveled further down the boardwalk. You browsed along the rows of shops, pointing at all the interesting things on sale. As the afternoon stretched on, your gang continued to enjoy the boardwalk. Elizabeth took long strides in the pack, cutting her way through the crowd. Everyone was willing to follow her. The Cesareros were giving her some leeway since it was her first time there, and you were used to your older sister's attitude. She was making a beeline to the roller coasters, the singular big kid ride of the boardwalk, and nothing was going to stand in her way. You hung back with Derek, George, and Nicholas. Elizabeth was fine on her own, and you weren't just there for the rides. You wanted to spend time with your friends. Nicholas had stopped holding on to Derek, instead flitting around on his own. Derek continued to keep a sharp eye on him. He occasionally pursed his lips when Nicholas was on the cusp of wandering farther away than safety allowed. He watched the little boy as well. His attention wasn't nearly as single-minded as Elizabeth. He eventually started to lag, unable to keep up with Elizabeth's breakneck pace. Nicholas trotted at the end of the group, slowing his pace, falling behind, then bursting forward to catch back up. It happened on repeat. His eyelids drooped and his forehead bobbed forward. There was an expression of vacant determination on his face. It was a special kind of stubbornness only the youngest people in society could muster. There was a type where the concept of stomping wasn't just ignored, it flat out didn't exist in their minds. Luckily for him, Nicholas had a more self-aware big brother who could set limits for him. Hey, let's sit down for a second. What? It's a log walk, especially if you got small legs. So you mean for you? That's right, I do need to take a break. Derek willingly accepted Elizabeth's shot at his statue. You could guess why pretty easily based on his leading tone. If Derek wanted to rest, Nicholas would want that too. Derek scanned around the area and pointed out some tables in the distance. Elizabeth glanced at the path ahead, but once didn't argue about changing the course. She picked out an empty table that looked to be the cleanest of the section. Everyone took a seat, and with a marked preference of sitting under the shaded half. You grabbed your water bottle and took a long, refreshing drink. It remained relatively cool on your tongue. Derek heft Nicholas onto his lap. His brother wiggled slightly until he found a comfortable position. Luna had the right idea. It's water time. Nicholas gave no audible response. His eyes were completely closed. However, he did accept the water Derek placed in his hands. He sipped it sluggishly. Unfortunately, Nicholas tipped the water bottle upwards until it started to spill.
Oops.
Derek snatched the bottle up back and chuckled. Nicholas opened his eyes slightly, very perturbed by getting splashed. He rubbed his wet face on Derek's shirt and stayed resting against his chest. Derek patted his head. He had to admit it was cute. Derek and George sat their water too, side-eyeing the scene, but not saying a word. You should drink too, Derek. Thanks, I will. He pulled out his water bottle with a smile and began to hydrate. George finished his drink with a final chug and inclined his head toward his two brothers. Nicholas is going to fall asleep. Elizabeth twisted the cap back on her bottle. She was ready to go. What now? Nicholas let out a small snuffly noise. Oh, that's adorable. Derek looked down at his clearly sleeping little brother, but it was no issue for Derek. He brushed it off as clearly as Elizabeth's insult. It's cool, I'll find our parents and you can look after Nico while he naps. Mom and Dad won't mind taking him along since he was down for the count. They're probably staying at one of those restaurants or browsing or a store or something. Elizabeth nodded, glad that it wouldn't be just her problem. George appeared more hesitant.
Okay.
He peeked at Elizabeth and then back at you. Derek smiled reassuringly and continued to pitch his plan.
Anyway.
Plus, Elizabeth wanted to ride the roller coaster. I would have had to sit back with Nicholas anyway since he's too short to ride it. It just makes sense for you to do that while I'm dropping off Nicholas, so go get that ride. I'll catch up later. George sighed. He wasn't being left behind thanks to Nicholas, but was placated enough not to argue with his older brother. Are you sure? You watched Eric's face carefully, but he gave no sign of concern. Yeah, definitely. I'll be back in a flash. You won't even miss me. We should all go to find your parents together. Splitting up's a bad idea. Yeah. He snuck a glance at Derek before meekly pointing out their instructions. We're supposed to stay together in a group. That's true. Derek scratched his head uncertain. But wouldn't it be lousy for everyone to come? It'll be easy to find your parents if we work together. He paused again, but ultimately grins. Yeah, you guys are right. It was a relief that I wasn't going to that I was going to run off. Elizabeth, however, sighed in her exasperation.
Fine.
Fine. We'll all go. Let's make it quick. Find the parents and leave the kid, and ride the roller coaster in and out. It'll be a team effort. He put on his game face, ready to take the day back on track.
It's on.
We got a mission. Let's go get it done. Operation Find Our Parents is on. This is why, modern day society, phones are great. Derek winked, full of confidence. We'll see that roller coaster soon. Derek carefully scooped his little brother up from his lap and adjusted him onto a carrying position. Nicholas has wrinkled his nose, but otherwise didn't stir when Derek hopped to his feet. He dealt with your water and stood as well, with Elizabeth and George following shortly behind you. Derek sped down the boardwalk, moving fast but smooth enough not to bother Nicholas. You and the rest of the group had to keep up at a good pace not to be left behind. Everyone went down the line of stores and peeked into the restaurant windows. You spread across the rows, using your numbers to go through multiple places at a time. Despite dividing and conquering, no one was further than shouting distance, and you all kept an eye on one another. However, within an effective crisscrossing strategy, there was no signs of the missing parents. You were grouped on one side of the road with a mixture of concern from most and impatient from Elizabeth.
Man.
What now, team? Do they have a lost child station at this place? You could tell them we lost 4 very large toddlers out on the boardwalk. George snickered while Derek grinned goofily. He ended up being the one to shake his head and nix the idea. Kids are taken to the office of the first aid station. We'll just end up stuck there until our parents come get us. I doubt that'd be any faster. Fine then, how about we just wake Nicholas already? Then we wouldn't have to find our parents. No! The brothers harshly whispered in sync, leaning toward Elizabeth with the utmost intensity. Nicholas twitched in Derek's arms from the commotion. Both of the boys tensed. Derek froze, grimacing until Nicholas yawned and shoved his face back into Derek's shirt. He and George sighed, visibly relaxing. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow at their production.
Seriously?
What kind of older sibling are you? If Nicholas is sleeping, then he needs to sleep. And it's not just about being nice. Nicholas won't want to have fun. He will start crying and yelling. Then we'll have to carry him back around while he's grouchy, unless we can manage him to get back to sleep. But why do all that when he's already asleep? Trust me, the best case scenario, well, but besides us not being able to find Mom or Dad anymore because they vanished, but still. Derek breathed through his nose indigently, while George folded his arms tightly against his cheek, standing in stern agreement. Geez, sorry for not being so much of an expert big sister. I don't remember Luna being that much of a pain. Elizabeth, you may not be an expert sibling for Nicholas, but you are for me. I'll take it. Elizabeth's reaction was subtle, but you could tell she was actually quite pleased. She waved her arms forward limply. Come on, then. The group followed her lead and continued to search, unable to think of any better ideas. You all scoured the boardwalk, all 4 pairs of eyes looking intently. The sun turned golden as the beach began to disappear under the horizon. You glanced out to the sea, and it looked like as if the ocean was swallowing the day. Lights began to click on, and the already shiny buildings at the boardwalk were set aglow. It took a moment to absorb the sunset. It was nice to take a breath and ignore the noisy backdrop. It was then you finally got your answer to your mystery. No wonder you hadn't noticed it before. Derek, look! You pointed your finger straight at your realization. Derek jumped at your outburst and followed your command. He squinted at the distance before he dropped his jaw. As soon as he understood, he blurted out in shock. They rented bikes? Across the way, pedaling along, the two pairs of parents were having a lovely double date. They were far enough away that you couldn't see much more than their helmets. I mean, you can tell that Mom was laughing about something with her head thrown back. That explains that, he muttered under his breath in frustration. Elizabeth conned with a wryly amused snort. She gestured to your parents. Really have to give it to our moms zooming around this whole time while we've been running right after them on foot. How are we going to get them to stop? She threw her hands up, waving them meekly like she was trying to flag down a moving car on the side of the street. Are we going to scream and jump until they notice us? Derek squinted at the four bikes, looking pained. He didn't like Elizabeth's sarcastic suggestion at all. He let out a tired breath that sounded dangerously close to his sigh. George tilted his head in concern. This music always makes me a little bit sleepy. Derek's shoulders drooped, visibly lowering Nicholas. He took another deep breath and shook his head.
Ugh.
I can't do it. I can't give him to them. Elizabeth's eyebrows shot straight up, and her lips pinched together. She thought Derek was losing it.
Now what?
What are you going to do then? Derek flinched and bit his lips. He met your eyes and then shrugged. Nothing. It's just one of those things. It happens. He fixed his expression into a cheerfully grin, obviously trying to bring the mood up. At Elizabeth's disbelieving stare, he turned to face the sunset. The dissipating light bathed into his profile in a soft glow. It shone on Nicholas and then strained on Derek's arms. Don't worry. I'm going to hold Nicholas until it's time to go home. The rest of you can keep having fun. Go wherever you want. George uncomfortably pulled at his shirt, stretching the fabric at its seams. I don't want to go. I want to help. He visibly felt bad about all this being put on Derek. You got the impression that if Georgie was a little bit bigger, he'd offer to take a turn holding his baby brother instead.
No.
Oh, it's okay. I'll be fine. You really shouldn't waste half your time standing around with me. Plus, then who would help Elizabeth and Luna around the boardwalk? Then you haven't been here before. They haven't been here before. You know this place and can make sure they don't get lost or don't miss all the good parts. George turned to you and Elizabeth, but hesitated with his answer. It would help me to know we didn't send them off alone. They're our guests, right? Okay. Thanks, George. Derek leaned closer to Elizabeth and whispered, I don't want George to miss out on the boardwalk because of Nicholas or because of me. Please go take him and have some fun. Elizabeth didn't know Derek well, but had a clear enough picture to know it wasn't worth bothering to push him on this. Elizabeth and Derek made eye contact, and for all of you could figure, they had some sort of elder sibling telepathy going on. That was only the one way you can explain it, because rather than arguing, she agreed to work with Derek. I'll do it. Elizabeth then pressed her lips together and considered you. She snorted, then lightly flicked your nose. But I don't need Luna with me. George isn't in pain. Derek's brows creased, not expecting that. I'll handle taking Derek out for some fun. Good, I thought you could do something useful. Luna. Derek's voice was strangled and hushed.
You don't have to.
You don't have to do that. What about you? Why does it have to be just you? You could have suggested we take turns walking Nicholas. Derek shook his head and you felt your stubbornness spark.
It doesn't matter.
It's fine. Someone's got to be here for Nicholas, and it's easiest if I do it, that's all. That's too bad, because I won't go.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure, George. Show me something interesting. George gulped but nodded. His gaze bounced between Elizabeth and your standoff with Derek, but he wisely decided to take his leave. He led Elizabeth away, passing by assorted stalls. He seems to have an idea of where he's going, but so you figured he and your sister would probably have a good time. Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot, bouncing around like the floor was on fire. He got more panicked the further away your sister and his brother got without you. Luna, you have to go. You have to go have fun. You need help more than I need fun. You're not getting rid of me. When the other two were completely out of sight, Derek stopped his frantic movement, having spent all of his excess nervous energy. He met his gaze head-on, staring at the friend who simply couldn't help himself from being helpful. His face changed into something tense and small. He wondered how many times he did this, took on all the responsibility so the others didn't have to be bothered. It didn't seem like he was called out on it much. Slowly, he smiled. His grin was tender enough to be genuine. Well then, if you're gonna be here anyways, we don't have to make ourselves miserable. Do you mean, well, Nicholas time? Now you're talking.
Alright.
Righty. He lifted Nicholas higher and stood tall, ready to take on the world. Then his knee buckled and he blushed. Can we sit down somewhere? Yeah, that's probably a good idea. After spending all that time searching high and low, both of you needed a break. You both dragged yourselves to a nearby bench, and it was thankfully empty and away from the crowd. Derek took a heavy seat and exhaled deeply. He kept Nicholas clutched close to his chest. It was a familiar motion, one that Derek must have done 100 times before. Maybe you shouldn't take on everything yourself. By that I mean, you can ask for help with Nicholas.
Maybe?
Oh, maybe. He appeared surprised at your observation and unsure how to respond. He sank in on himself, curling around Nicholas as he stared on the boards in front of him. He mumbled, soft enough that you had to hold your breath to hear. I don't think that's such a bad thing. You weren't sure what to make of that. He wasn't lying, but he looked too sad for it to be the full truth. He didn't say any more of it. After you both had settled, Derek carefully reached into his pocket, and he struggled to dig around to find what he was looking for. Aha! He pulled out his special snack bag in triumph. It was completely full, untouched by this morning. Derek tried to pick out some of the morsels from the bag, but it was even hard to keep Nicholas from flopping over. Need some help there? Derek flushed at your offer and became self-conscious over the fact that you noticed his difficulty. Thanks. Despite his embarrassment, he passed the snacks to you. He looked at the bag and he steadied his hold on Nicholas. Oh, I just need the controller chunks. You can leave the other stuff in there. Is that your favorite? Yeah, but no. You squinted at him in confusion. He laughed cheekily, having expected your reaction. It's my favorite snack in the bag, but it's not the reason I wanted. The other stuff isn't for me. There's a handful of cereal Nicholas secretly likes. That way he can have something that's just not candies and cookies. I bought walnuts for George in case we were out too long and he got hungry, and he dropped his gaze from you shyly.
Honestly?
The mangoes are for you. You know, maybe because in case you get hungry too. Okay. So, the food that you pick first in the bag is what actually determines what he says, which is really interesting. That's 4 handfuls. And what if you needed more for yourself? Did you not think of that? You'd be starving while holding on to extra snacks for everyone else. What did he actually eat today? You narrowed your eyes and tried to think back to if he had anything.
No worries.
It's nothing. He tried to reassure you and brush you off of your concern. To him, it wasn't a big deal. Do you want any mangoes? You can take it. You should eat it. It's your special snack bag.
Okay.
Alright, you can hand it over. He chuckled and he fished out some granola and mangoes. Derek held out his hand and carefully dropped the snacks into his palm. Thanks for getting mangoes for you, by the way. If I was gonna get a second thing for me, it would have been that. So it really worked out. Thanks. He plopped down one of the tiny little clusters in his mouth and started chewing. You offered Derek some of your own snacks. Want some? You out your baggie and planned a place where you could just pour out it for Derek if he said yes. His eyes lit up in amusement as he considered his snacks, but he winked at you, a clear sign of the clownery to come.
Sorry.
No, those are your snacks, so you gotta eat them. You laughed. Turnabout was fair play. You fused him, so he fused you. Both of you leisurely enjoyed your time. Derek ate away at the granola, peppering the air with soft crunching noises. You quietly let him savor his food. The munching and high-pitched gnawing was absorbed as the only sounds between you for a while. You passed Derek the last cluster of granola. You had to really try and get it out of the bag around all the cereal and walnut chunks. He accepted with a great enthusiasm and took the final bite. He swallowed, satisfied. He absentmindedly patted Nicholas's head as he peered up and down the street. Something caught his eye as he lit up. You know, I was so focused before I kind of forgot where we were. This is still the boardwalk. As he was excited as he had been toward the beginning of the day.
Let's go.
Want to walk around? There's a lot of interesting stuff here, even if we're only looking. Sure, I feel like strolling, maybe even get a good saunter on. Derek gave you a thumbs up and then at Nicholas. Can you help me move onto my back? That'll be easier for a long haul. You stood up to get him both. You stood up to help. It took both of you fumbling around, but with the effort, you were able to try and get the little boy comfortably on Derek's back. Then you left the bench behind to explore the bustling waterfront park. Without consciously deciding to, you gravitated to the edge of the path closest to the sea. You studied the beautiful ocean, your breath almost taken away by the water sparkling under the last flickers of sunlight. The evening remained pleasantly warm despite the encroaching darkness. Is it normal for Nicholas to fall asleep like this? Kind of. Sometimes something so exciting that Nicholas bounces off the wall just imagining it. By the time he actually gets there, he's already burnt himself out. I'm pretty sure Nico didn't sleep at all last night because he knew today was going to be Boardwalk Day. Will he be upset that he slept through the day when he wakes up? I promise he'll be alright. Nicholas isn't great at imagining what it might have done if things were different. He lives in the moment. As long as he wakes up on his own, he won't be a grouchy monster. You and parents should give you a raise. I don't think it works like that, but it would be cool if they did. Walking down the boardwalk was peaceful. The conversation was easy with the occasional giggle. Other groups of people passed by. Couples, young friend groups, and families with children all bustled about. You caught the slivers of conversation, ranging from the mundane to the philosophical. Derek glanced up at the faces around him and grinned to himself. It kind of feels like we're parents and this is our kid. He twisted around and showed Nicholas with amusement. You blushed, not sure how to respond. Derek's eyes widened at your shyness. It was contagious. He left out a nervous chuckle. I mean, it's just like we're a pair taking care of a kid. He turned back, not able to look at your face any longer. As he led down the boardwalk, you noticed a new skip in his step. Hey, I have an idea. Let's try the Ferris wheel. We've officially given up on getting our parents, and even Nico can do that. That'll be perfect. Derek let out a whoop and turned around like it was a happy dance. You laughed, trying to find his enthusiasm. If you keep that up, you're gonna wake the sleeping dragon there. Even if I did, we'll drag him to the wheel anyways. They'll rock him back to sleep. You smirked. Derek had an answer for everything. You both eagerly made your way through the crowd to get in line for the one ride that was an option for you. Derek cautiously weaved past people, making sure no one accidentally bumped into Nicholas along the way. The line was short, and it didn't take long for you to start boarding the ride. You piled onto the cabin, and Derek placed Nicholas in the corner of the metal bench, and sat next to him. Nicholas snuffled when he was jostled, but didn't wake. Derek wrapped his arms around him to secure him from falling forward. Nicholas unconsciously leaned his head over to rest on him. You rested on the bench across from them, eye to eye with Derek. It felt sturdy under you. Derek grinned wide and tapped his toes together as he waited for the ride to start. And it did. The carriage car rocked forward. Slowly you ascended into the sky. You could see the entire expanse of the boardwalk cabin. It was an amazing sight. From this height, the stalls and decorations looked like a magical land of toys. You glanced at Derek, curious if he was enjoying the view too. The sun had continued to sink as the Ferris wheel rose. The lights that reached inside the cabin through the little window was low. Sharp-edged shadows cut across Derek's body. He stopped shuffling his feet and switched to tapping his finger against the top of his knee in a jittery, uneven beat. With Nicholas still sound asleep, it felt like you were alone with Derek. In the small open space, high in the air, with no one else around you, you made one more attempt to get Derek to be more open with you. If he wouldn't do it now, then when would he be? Alright, Derek, there's no escape now. You're gonna have to tell me what's up. You began to list your points of concern, and the whole thing sounded even more unreasonable when you said it in a single sentence. You got the face paint Nicholas wanted, you picked out snacks for other people, you gave up your own chance to have fun today so your parents could go on a bike ride. Why don't you do things for yourself? He shrank under the accusation like the walls were bending in on him.
Well,
it's not like I can't ever do things for me. I do sometimes. You weren't convinced, and you spat it out with your furrow of your brow and the tight line of your mouth. Derek acted like the scolded child and hung his head in shame, but he felt compelled to fill in the uncomfortable silence your reaction had left. It's easier for me to do things It's easier for me to do things for other people than to try and fight for something just for me. And it makes sense. It makes everything easier for other people too. He almost spoke out in his defense to declare that he should stand up for what he needed, but you held back. Derek was finally expressing himself, and you didn't want to interrupt. He rambled on, trying to sort out his thoughts and arrange the words in a way that made sense to both you and himself.
I don't know.
I'm thinking about the people I love. I really seriously do like doing stuff that makes them happy. I don't want to have to stop doing any of that. Derek tightened his hands into his fists. His words were earnest, and he directed them straight towards you with an unwavering eye contact. I meant it, even though it's annoying sometimes. Annoying for me and whoever tries to stick with me. However, as true as it was, his resolution fizzled out almost immediately. Derek timidly sunk down in his seat. He brushed his little brother's bangs away from his closed eyes. It was a nervous momentary distraction. Nicholas offered him some emotional support by just being there. When Derek spoke again, it was in a tiny voice.
Maybe.
But maybe part of me is sort of hoping that instead of having to do more for myself and less for others, someone would try and do the things for me, too. Then it would be even. Derek shifted slightly. His head was still low, but his gaze shifted up onto you. It's kind of like a dream or something that I got. And if I'm doing that for anyone else, how am I ever gonna find someone who'll do it for me? I can't ask for that stuff that I'd even want to give. Your eyebrows shot up, but the rest of your body froze in place. Derek turned his face toward the window. It was enough to cover the way his cheeks had reddened. My family cares about me, obviously, but a lot of time that's the thing I need help with. With a laugh, Derek liberally tousled the hair of his beloved pain in his side who laid there. The youngest brother remained blissfully unaware of the troubles he's caused. The humor in his tone left Derek as quickly as it appeared. He couldn't get away from how serious the topic was, or how much he truly meant to get to him. It would be cool to have someone who's on my side and who would like me because of me, not because their family was supposed to love me. For every single instant, his eyes met yours, but then he instantly focused on the world outside the scruffed, cloudy window of the old Ferris wheel. You could see the lopsided grain reflected in the glass. Don't tell my bros I imagine some pretty dumb things. I'll promise to stay between us. Thanks. The foggy face you can make out in the window pane softened. He wasn't ready to show it directly, but you were glad you still got a glimpse of it. He grasped the top of one knee and took a breath through his nose. When he exhaled, he carefully laid out a few more words of consideration. Hey, Luna, is there somebody that you think... We never got to place that last part.
Forget it.
Forget it. Never mind. Wait, I want to know what you're going to say. Sorry, but don't worry about that. It's just that this idea I've been kicking around, but I should probably think it's a lot more besides. Derek shrugged an arm, cocked his head down an extra bit of company you still gently snoring. It's kind of awkward to talk about all this personal stuff with my baby brother, I hear, even if he is asleep. He chuckled good-naturedly, moving his hand to scratch behind his ear. Maybe I can try again later. The back of his foot knocked against the low wall of the outcropping metal seat on repeat. Sounded like the end of conversation, but that didn't mean nothing else was on his mind. Derek was always considering something, and most of the time it was other people. Things someone else might have missed or forgotten weren't taken for granted by him. Thanks for helping me with the snacks before. That piece of appreciation was given easily. The next, though, was far meager.
And thanks for coming with me.
Adorable. Thanks for letting me come with you. This time Derek shared his bright and bashful face directly with you. You could always count on him. That was a certainty. And Derek knew that the sentiment was mutual. We look out for him whenever he did for himself. Or not, whether he asked you to or not, and whenever he wanted you to or not. It was just as sure. Not much more was said before the ride came to a steady, inevitable end. You disembarked from the cabin with Nicholas securely in Derek's arms. You strolled from the exit to the nearest stalls to ask the employee what time it was. 8 p.m. was quickly approaching. You better go meet up at the meetup place. Can you help me get Nico on my back again? How about I carry him now?
Oh!
Instinctively, Derek pulled back. He clung tighter to his youngest brother, keeping the weight on the burden squarely on himself. He waited, calm and stable, just being as patient as always. Ultimately, the tension of his face and the hesitancy in his heart faded, and he accepted your offer graciously. That'd actually be great. Thanks, Luna. Derek shifted his grip on Nicholas before he propped the small boy over your shoulders. You tucked your elbows around Nico's knees and hunched over so you wouldn't spill off. Nico draped heavily on your back like a fluffy car-patterned cape. He really wasn't that heavy, but you could easily imagine how carrying that extra load could get tiresome after a while. Derek definitely needed a break. Perfect. Together you would wander across the path. The people surrounding you were full of enthusiasm, bustling from ride to ride and store to store, but a quiet peace had settled between you and Derek. Your day at the boardwalk was already coming to an end. The sky had gone completely dark by the time you reached the meeting spot, but the world around you was still awash with lights. Street lamps were bore down on you while spotlights shot upward to illuminate the biggest rides. You and Derek huddled at the side of the path. You wanted to stay out of the way of other visitors who were trickling off to the parking lot, and other ones who were rushing the opposite way for a last-minute excursion on the boardwalk. You hoped that the strangers enjoyed themselves, but for you and Derek, plus the sleeping Nicholas, there was nowhere to go. At least not until you caught sight of your currently missing family members.
I figured.
We beat them. Good for us, we win. We used the breaks as an opportunity to readjust Nicholas. He started to slide a bit during the trip over. Since there were only 2 awakened members of your group, you both wordlessly kept your eyes peeled. Every figure approached in the distance was scrutinized, and then disregarded as just another stranger. The process was repeated for a few minutes, but eventually 2 shadow forms coming down the path stepped under a light, and you immediately recognized them. Georgie, Elizabeth. Derek jumped up and waved his hands over his head. He was entirely free to draw attention to himself that way, thanks to you taking over the piggybacking Nicholas. Even on the other end of the boardwalk, you could tell Elizabeth was smirking. When Derek's brother and your sister rejoined you in the front of the stall, you were proven right. She definitely had a leaning smirk.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cute that you're taking a turn with a precious baby. Ha! Derek barked out a laugh. Elizabeth's smile wasn't the only noticeable thing on her face, and even Derek wasn't polite enough to let her get away with it. Maybe, but what's that on your forehead? The oldest kid hadn't returned exactly the same way you left her. She now had a bright white golf ball emblazoned on her skin with non-toxic water-soluble paint. So much for not needing something like that. After a small huff, Elizabeth plainly laid out her case. George and I were taking a little bit, talked about a little about sports we liked. When I told him I did golf, he suggested I get a face paint of that. I did, and it was fun. Her chin was high, and she spoke with defiance. Elizabeth absolutely refused to be embarrassed by her change of mind. George stood at her sister's side, proudly took credit for the accomplishment. She just didn't want to do it before because she was just being a Lizabrat. Huh?
Nice try.
Better than being a Borgur. Georgie's and Elizabeth chuckled at the quips. Apparently they had a unique nickname to one another now. It left Derek nearly speechless. Wow. Clearly you and Derek weren't the only ones who went through a bonding experience this evening. I feel like I'm being replaced, he joked. You are sorry. Haha, tell that to our moms. I think I can convince them to adopt Georgie. Tell that to Georgie's parents. Lighthearted laughter drifted around the room. Whether you were divided up or together, the Suzannes and Mayor kids enjoyed each other's company. Your sister then exhaled calmly and followed out with a sage nod. I'll take Nicholas now. Oh. Whether Derek was going to agree or disagree with the offer, you didn't know, but Elizabeth didn't give him a chance. She wasn't suggesting what he thought she was. Gotta take off for like 10 or 15 minutes left. The two of you should use it.
What?
Wait, you want us to leave him with you? Uh-huh. Derek took a hesitant step back and turned his face away. Expression tensed the same way it had when he first realized Nico was going to be asleep for the rest of the trip. Nicholas is going to be mad if I'm not there. The resistance was a weak mumble, and his middle brother spoke with much more boldness. Nicholas isn't going to know, and what he doesn't know won't kill him. Georgie! Derek was at a loss on where that had come from. You hadn't expected it either. George was never a rule bender. You must have missed even more than you thought during his time with Elizabeth. Will there really be time for that before our parents get here? Elizabeth pressed a hand over to the golf ball on her forehead. She groaned loud enough that she couldn't even convince someone passing by she had a massive migraine. But that was not the actual source of her strain.
Jeez!
You're both a menaces of socially polite behavior, and you just need to be stopped. Go have fun, for Pete's sake. Yeah, hurry. You have to do that stuff at Boardwalk while we're at the Boardwalk. He shyly scuffed his sneak on the ground with a doe-eyed expression that was more expected of from Nicholas. It was extremely rare for anyone to tell Derek what the plan was. He was used to coming up with all ideas and taking charge. Derek glanced at you. It was impossible not to smile at him.
Alright,
I'll do it. Then we're doing it. Finally! There was a quick passing of the buck as Elizabeth took Nicholas into her hands. She carefully positioned his head against her shoulders and cradled his legs under her forearms. Derek found the hold satisfactory and entrusted his younger brother to her the same way he let you borrow the responsibility of watching out for Georgie. I totally get that. No more time was wasted. He shot off down the boardwalk one more time. The flow of traffic had shifted even more from where you started waiting, with everyone except for you moving toward the exit. You pushed against the tide into the heart of the park. Your feet and heart were beating hard. Derek shouted over the sound of the breathless, thrilled voice. Lines are gonna be all gonna be short this late, but I don't think we can do two. Which one do you want to do? Or we don't have to go on a ride at all. Would you be up for riding the Ferris wheel again?
definitely.
I think that'd be a fitting way to end off the day. Even though through heavy breaths he spoke sweetly, it was more thrilling than any roller coaster would have been. You and Derek sped straight toward your goal. You tilted your head back every so often as the tower of Ferris swing got close as you ran toward it. As Derek had theorized, the line wasn't even half the length it was for the most of the day. It only took you a few minutes before you were on the platform and awaiting your ride. You hopped into the next private carriage that would be in the circle, and you took a seat on the hard bench. This time, Derek didn't have the spot opposite to you. Instead, he nestled on the same bench. His fingers curled around the edge, and he leaned forward to look out the window. You did the same. Oh, and he's blushing! You did the same, trying to get the best view you could. And then you were slowly lifted into the sky once more. It was a peaceful ride with few words shared. Derek's mood had turned contemplative with you being alone together in the dark cabin. But it was absolutely beaming when you returned to solid ground and left for the ride. Derek had stared at the sparkling stars beyond the glints and glamour of the boardwalk. There was a peace between you that there hadn't been any other moment during your trip.
Phew.
Hey. His eyes had stolen the shine from the cosmos when he placed his gaze back into you. It was way too awkward to talk about this before with my little brother right there, but I just want to say I really like hanging out with you, Luna. I love my brothers and parents a ton, and my other friends are great too, but when I have to pick someone to team up with, I think about you. He shrugged his shoulders with a slight grin. Derek was someone you could count on for honesty, but sometimes it still surprised you in what he was capable of. You flush and look away. He looked away too wonderful. Getting the chance to spend time with him was truly just the two of you was more than you could hope for. You owed Elizabeth one. Despite taking an extra and tired jaunt around the boardwalk, you still arrived at the entrance before your parents. However, there had been a shift in the group. Nicholas was awake. As soon as Derek noticed the third figure standing by Elizabeth and George, he started like he was hit by a bolt. He made a break for the siblings, and you were right behind him. The motion was not exactly subtle, and it caught the attention of the boy in question. He let out a shout when he saw your rapid approach. Well, technically it wasn't your rifle that made an impact.
Derek's back!
And Derek sprinted away from the meeting spot, not willing to wait a single second for the reunion. He crashed into Derek, wrapping his arms around his brother's thighs and sticking his head in the space between Derek's legs. Oof. It was far too powerful enough to knock Derek off balance. He had to swing his arms out to the side to stop from wobbling. Once he was sure he was going to topple over, Derek bent down and scooped his hanger on. Seeing Derek carrying Nicholas felt extremely familiar by this point, considering that it had been the case for the entire afternoon. But Derek wasn't sick of it yet. You could handle it for a little while longer. Derek nudged his head toward the other two members of your party, encouraging you to come. Together, you and Derek walked the rest of the way to the boardwalk entrance, while Nicholas was clung onto Derek the whole way. George waved over at you.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Hey. After the moment you were in the whispering distance, you were greeted by a hushed message from your own big sibling. Good job. She put a finger to your cheek and smirked. Derek slowly kneeled to let Nicholas get down. The little boy strapped on his own 2 feet, but his 2 hands didn't detach. They only grasped the hem of Derek's jersey instead. While brushing his brother's messy hair, Derek glanced up at Nico's temporary babysitters. He stared at them questioningly. What happened? Was the obvious, unspoken question. He's only been up for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And he was really grumpy at first because you weren't there, but we got him talking about the dream adventure he had when he was sleeping to keep him busy, and that worked. It was really funny, and Nico had a great time too. George beamed up with pride at the success, and you noticed how much closer he stood to Elizabeth. Your sister accepted his company just as welcomely. They were their own partners in crime for the day. I'm basically positive that after about 5 seconds he stopped telling us his actual dreams and was making it all up, but it was cute. Derek blinked away at the two as he witnessed a miracle. It was kind of in a small way. He was able to pass on the mantle of responsibility, and everything turned out fine. However, Elizabeth and Georgie won't be replacing Derek anytime soon, or likely ever. Nicholas might have behaved for a bit, but now that his biggest brother was here, the young lad wanted to be taken care of. His gaze dropped to the ground and he pulled up the end of Derek's shirt. Derek, my tummy hurts. I want ice cream. No ice cream, Nico. That's not going to help your stomach. But you can have some of my snacks. I've saved you part of it. Derek's tone was really sold on the idea. It was full of appeal from the fact that it was his snacks. He could hype up the product better than any of the employees running games on Boardwalk. Nicholas brightened up immediately. He clasped his own collar and leaned his head all the way back to look at his brother's face where he stood against Derek's legs. He wasn't kept waiting long. Derek pulled out his baggiest pocket and shifted through the mix of walnuts and cereal to pick out the treats, especially chosen for Nico. Once he collected a small handful and passed it over to Nico, he carefully dropped the round cereal puffs one by one in Nico's tiny palms. The amount was almost overflowing. Nicholas gratefully received his offering. He shoved the whole thing into his face and ate it directly out of his hands. It reminded you of feeding oats to a pony, except in this case, Nicholas was both the feeder and the fed. Derek nodded in satisfaction and rolled his bags over his palm. George, these are for you. He gathered the last wayward piece of cereal and then offered the well-worn bag of nothing but walnuts to the middle child. It's been a really long day and there's still a ride back. You should eat something. George didn't argue with that. He gladly accepted his brother's thoughtful gesture.
Thank you!
Thanks. George plucked out just one from the pack, the heartiest looking nut in the bunch, and took a bite out of it. His gaze shifted over to Elizabeth, or Elizabeth, as Georgie knew her, and he swallowed his snack. Then he asked a question. Do you want any?
Thanks.
You know what? I would, thanks. Elizabeth was the third person who took turn opening up a hand to receive a snack. George shook a few of the nuts into her waiting palm. Derek, Luna can have some too. Nicholas's fingers remained pushed against his mouth, but his distinct chomping chopped. He spoke muffled, words filtered through the handful of half-crushed sugars.
Okay!
I can share too. He stuck his sticky palms up toward Derek's face, instead of his own. The gesture had crumbs cascading down his shirt. Nico couldn't reach high enough to get all the way up to his brother's mouth. Derek shook with giggles and poked Nicholas's wrist to nudge the pile of soggy cereal around. He had to take a second to breathe before he could explain himself. I got some of the cereal right here. That'll be from you. Thanks, Nicholas. I'm gonna eat it. The logic seemed sound to Nicholas, or maybe it was just seeing his brother smile made Nicholas smile too. Either way, he accepted not taking more of the cereal and counted as him sharing it. But he wasn't done. Nicholas turned around on the dime, arms still outstretched, and positioned his hand towards you. Amazingly, he wanted to share with someone other than Derek. You kiddos are way too nice. You could add his sweetness. You knew he was trying to be nice, and that was adorable. Before Nicholas could start flinging bits of cereal at you in his eagerness to share, a warm voice boomed at the din of the busy boardwalk. Good evening, family and friends. It was Mrs. Cesare, and not only him, he spotted all four of the parents weaving their way through the crowd. We're here. The sight of his mommy and daddy made Nicholas forget all about finishing his pre-chewed snack. He smashed the remaining cereals into his mouth so he could use both of his hands to wave at his parents. Dad, Mom, Derek called back with equal excitement. The parents picked up the pace and gathered around their children. Greetings were shared between adults and kids. Immediately, Mom noted the face painted now during your group.
Wonderful.
Those look wonderful, so creative. Nicholas forced himself to swallow a mouthful. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He snuck in a huge breath, pointed to his cheek, and screeched, Ah, there's a spider! There's a spider! Oh no, you're right, it is a spider. My goodness, it is terrifying.
Be careful.
Don't make any quick movements, kiddo. It might bite you.
Yes.
Yes, wait there. I'll help you, son. Mrs. Sayre gave Nico's chubby cheek a pinch to get rid of the dangerous snack, and he retracted his hand in shock when he realized it was in fact only paint. Nicholas snickered gleefully at the hubbub amongst the grown-ups. Mission accomplished. Mrs. Sayre then clasped her hands together and changed the topic. Well, everyone, I'm sorry you beat us here. Hopefully you weren't waiting too long.
This is gonna be great.
No, it was fine.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you waiting here for us. And how was the bike ride? You saw us?
Uh-huh.
We did. Elizabeth rolled her eyes toward Derek's, and she didn't say anything else about it. It was lovely. Such a way to explore the boardwalk. Returning them, though, was a real hassle. That's why you got here late. Definitely worth it, though. It was. And did you children have a good day? Nicholas threw his hands in the air to answer with full force. Yeah. Derek softly patted his little brother's head. His voice was much quieter and distinctly relieved. Yeah. You and George and Elizabeth nodded and offered your own points of agreement. It might not have gone the way you imagined, but none of them would have considered it a waste of time. It was experiments worth having.
That's great.
That's great. I'm sure you made most of what you had, but we better get going. It's very late. Perhaps you should pick up dinner on the way home? Absolutely. It's been hours since we left, and Nicholas can always sleep in the car since we won't be home before bedtime either way. All the kids, except for Nicholas, had their face go completely flat, and Elizabeth snorted. Mrs. Eyre didn't miss that instant reaction. She raised a brow. Derek strained the bands on his wrist and broke the news to his mom. There was a glint of amusement in his eyes. Sorry, Mom, I don't think that's gonna happen. Nicholas remained oblivious to the discussion going on about him. He was leaping and bounding from board to board, completely refreshed. His mother frowned. It was obvious to her what had occurred. Mrs. Cesare was unflustered. He shared some dignified optimism.
Well then,
he'll be up to keep us company.
True.
We'll all be together. Those words reached the small ears of the youngest person there. Nicholas held on to Derek's abdomen, liking the sound of the promise. His older brother looked down at him warmly.
Good job, team.
Glad to have you on your back, Nico. And George, you're such a reliable bro. He wrapped one arm around Nicholas and reached over to pull his other brother into a hug. George welcomed and reciprocated the embrace. The Cesare trio snuggled together into a tight squeeze, and their flanking face painted rubbed off down each other. Your gaze wandered over from the public display of affection and went to your own older sister. Elizabeth was definitely not a hugger, but you whispered your own siblingly appreciation for her. Thank you for being such a reliable sis. She gave a smug flip of her hair. Forget it, I owed you one for after your grandson for me on Daddy Day. Aw, Elizabeth.
Let's go.
Let's go. That was all he needed to be said. You completely party took the final steps on the boardwalk, heading straight toward the parking lot. Mrs. Eyre was leading the pack. Hey, Mom. Nicholas shouted in Waydor to get his mom's attention from behind while still using one hand to grip Derek. Guess what? Lisbeth carried me. She did? That's so considerate. Lisbeth?
Oh.
Lisbeth. Your mom's working on them, sharing hush commentary with each other, a distance away from the group and tittering over what they heard. You're so sweet, Elizabeth. I feel like that who carried Nicholas the most today should get the biggest say in what we have for dinner.
My thoughts exactly.
I second that. Sounds fair to me. Then we all agree. I guess that means Derek will be our dinner decider for tonight?
Maybe.
Probably. Derek scratched at the spider on his cheek and chuckled airily. He shrugged without comment and simply continued to walk. His brothers stayed at Derek's sides and they bumped along together. He strolled with Elizabeth while the parents surrounded the sets of siblings as the front and from behind. Derek's hands were full of Nicholas and George, but stuck out a fond glance at you. None of this is his excitement had faded. The night was still young and bright, and you knew you can count on every person there. Despite being miles away from Sunset Bird, you felt right at home. With that, let's try this again. So, I hope you guys have a good day, night, week, a month of your lives, and may the stars forever guide your path wherever they might lead you into the future. And I hope to see you all next time.